never expected his hand on my chest to feel that warm. I never thought the sound of his breath, slow and careful, just inches from my lips, would make my whole world blur around the edges. But that night in the RV, as the wind howled outside and his body slid next to mine, inside the cramped sleeping bag, everything I thought I knew about us cracked wide open. 2 weeks earlier, I would have laughed if someone told me I'd fall for my best friend. I've known Jake since high school, back when our biggest adventure was skipping algebra class and stealing beers from his older brother's fridge. Now in our late 20s, we were still tight. Not the everyday text kind of friends, but the kind you call at 2 a.m. because your car broke down and you know he'll drive 3 hours without a second thought. So when Jake suggested renting an RV and heading into the mountains to finally live a little, I didn't hesitate. Work had been hell. My last date ended with a ghost, and honestly, I just needed a break. From everything. I figured a week of hiking, fishing, and beers by the fire would be exactly what we needed. Hey, if you're here and feeling the vibe already, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe to support these stories and help more people find them. It means the world and it keeps us going. Thanks for being here. The first few days were perfect. We drove through golden hills and quiet valleys, blasting old punk playlists and eating junk food like we were 18 again. The RV was small but comfortable, with 2 beds, a kitchenette, and barely enough room for 2 grown men to pass each other without turning sideways. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours for the week, and that gave it a strange kind of magic. Jake was different on the road, freer somehow, as if all the stress he carried back home had melted away with each passing mile. He laughed louder, smiled more, even sang along to songs he'd usually call too emo. And there was something else, something I hadn't noticed before, or maybe something I'd ignored. The way his eyes lingered when I took off my shirt to rinse off at the lake, or how his hand stayed just a little too long on my shoulder when we joked around. I told myself it was just the closeness of the trip, the bond of friendship. Nothing more. It couldn't be. But on the 4th night, after a long hike that left our muscles sore and our minds fuzzy from exhaustion, the weather turned cold. A sudden snap in temperature had dropped us into the low 30s, and the thin insulation of the RV wasn't cutting it. I bundled up in my sleeping bag, shivering slightly, as I heard Jake curse under his breath from the other bunk. "Dude, this thing's useless," he muttered. "I'm freezing my ass off." I laughed. Should have bought that fleece bag instead of the cheap one. There was a pause. Then, in that quiet voice he used only when he wasn't quite sure of something, Jake said, "Scoot over." I froze, my heart skipping a beat I didn't expect. "Into mine?" I asked, trying to sound casual, like this wasn't suddenly making my skin buzz. He chuckled nervously. "You're the one with the good sleeping bag." I unzipped it a little, shifted to the side, and mumbled, "Fine, but no funny business." The zipper closed behind him, and suddenly Jake was there, pressed against me, his body radiating heat. His breath tickled the back of my neck. We didn't say anything for a few moments. We just laid there in silence, listening to the wind rock the RV and feeling the beat of each other's hearts start to sink. That's when everything began to change. There was a strange electricity in the air. Not the kind that zaps you fast and vanishes, but the kind that hums low and constant, building with each breath, each inch of shared space. Jake's arm brushed mine as he shifted slightly, And though it seemed accidental, he didn't move away. He just let it stay there, warm and solid, like he belonged next to me. At first, I told myself it was just about warmth. 2 guys, 1 bag, mountain temperatures. That's survival. But the more I listened to his breath, slow and measured, the more I noticed how he wasn't exactly sleeping. Neither of us were. He let out a quiet sigh, the kind that said more than words. Then, in a voice so soft it barely broke through the hum of the RV's heater, he said, "I missed this man. Us." I turned slightly, my face brushing the side of his. "What do you mean?" Jake didn't answer right away. His fingers moved, slow and hesitant, grazing my wrist like he was asking for permission without saying it out loud. I didn't pull away. "I mean, I missed just being with you," he said. "Not distracted, not rushed, not pretending everything's fine. Just us." His words dug deep into my chest, stirring up things I'd locked away for years. Questions I never asked myself, moments I brushed off. The way I used to feel a little too excited when he'd call out of the blue. The way no one else's jokes ever landed quite like his. The way I sometimes replayed the stupidest memories of us for no reason at all. "You could have just said that," I whispered. Jake gave a soft laugh. "Yeah, well, I didn't know how to say it before." Something was happening, something neither of us had planned for, and yet it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Still, I needed to be sure I wasn't imagining it. "Jake," I said slowly, is this—" He cut me off, not with words, but with his hand. It slid up to my chest again, his palm warm through the fabric of my shirt, his fingers slightly trembling, and then his forehead leaned against mine. We stayed there for a long time, not quite kissing, not quite moving, just frozen in the pull of something unspoken. "I don't know what this is," he said finally, "but I know I don't want it to stop." The walls I'd built over the years, the ones that told me this could never happen, not with him, not with us, started to crumble in silence. I didn't know if it was the cold, the closeness, or something that had been slowly growing all along, but I felt it now, undeniable and real. I turned fully toward him, and the space between our faces disappeared. His lips brushed mine, soft and unsure, like he wasn't quite convinced it was allowed. I kissed him back just once, careful and cautious, and the moment stretched, suspended in the quiet hum of everything we never said. It wasn't wild or rushed. It was simple, tender, and so filled with emotion it made my throat tighten. His hand cupped my jaw gently, like he'd been waiting to do it forever, but didn't want to break the spell by going too fast. When we finally pulled apart, I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel confusion. I just felt calm. Jake rested his head on my shoulder and whispered, "This doesn't feel wrong, does it?" "No," I said quietly. "It feels like we've been headed here the whole time." The next morning, the world outside the RV was dusted with frost, the windows fogged over from our shared breath through the night. But inside the sleeping bag, his arm was still around me, not tightly, not possessively, just there. As if that one quiet touch had been waiting for years to exist. I didn't want to move, I didn't want to speak. I wanted to freeze time and stay in that moment, suspended between sleep and something entirely new. But I knew the silence couldn't last forever. Jake stirred beside me, rubbing his eyes, and for a second he looked like he was trying to figure out whether it had been a dream Then his gaze settled on me. A little nervous, a little unsure, but he didn't let go. "Morning," he said softly, voice husky from the cold and sleep. "Hey," I replied, forcing a smile that felt like it came from somewhere deeper than my mouth. He hesitated, then reached up to brush a strand of my hair back from my forehead, like it was something he'd done 100 times in his mind, but never in real life. "You good?" I nodded slowly, my chest tight with unspoken words. "Yeah. Are you?" He gave a crooked grin. "Honestly? Better than I thought I'd be." We finally sat up, the cold biting at our skin as we unzipped the bag and faced the chill of the morning. The air inside the RV had changed. Something had shifted, not broken, not shattered, just transformed, and neither of us knew quite what to do with it. The awkward part wasn't kissing him. It was everything after. Making coffee suddenly felt loaded. Sharing breakfast in silence felt heavier than it should have. We danced around each other like we weren't sure if last night had been a doorway or a detour. He kept glancing at me like he wanted to say something, but each time the words died behind a half smile or a casual shrug. We decided to go for a short hike, hoping the fresh air might clear the fog between us. As we walked side by side through a narrow trail, our boots crunching over frost-bitten leaves, the tension hummed louder than the birds overhead. "I've never kissed a guy before," Jake finally blurted, staring at the trail ahead. "I figured," I said, trying to sound calm, even though my heart was hammering. He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. "But it didn't feel weird. It didn't feel wrong, you know?" "I know," I replied. "It didn't feel weird for me either." He stopped walking and turned to face me, eyes searching mine like he was still waiting for a punchline, still trying to catch up to his own emotions. "I don't know what this makes me," he said, "and I'm not sure I care. I know what I felt last night, what I still feel." I stepped closer, our boots nearly touching, and reached for his hand, his fingers laced with mine without hesitation. "You don't have to name it," I said. "We don't have to figure everything out right now." A long breath left his chest, like he'd been holding it for days. "You're okay with that?" I nodded. "I just want to be with you, Jake, however that looks." He leaned in again, his forehead touching mine in the quiet middle of the woods. His hand gently squeezed mine, and for the first time since that night in the sleeping bag, I saw a different look in his eyes. Not confusion, not panic, but something soft and steady. Hope. The fire that night crackled louder than usual, throwing warm flickers of light across Jake's face as he sat on a log just a few feet away, his hoodie pulled tight over his ears, his eyes flicking between the flames and me. There was something about the way he looked at me now. Not like a friend sharing beers around a campfire, but like someone seeing me for the first time. Really seeing me. I'd known Jake for more than a decade, but sitting there, watching the soft curve of his lips as he smiled at a dumb story I told about getting lost in a grocery store once, he somehow felt brand new. He reached for his beer and clinked it softly against mine. To surviving another freezing night? I grinned. And to stealing body heat? He laughed, then caught himself, like he wasn't sure if we were allowed to joke about it yet. The moment lingered, and the laughter faded into something deeper. A question, a possibility. "You know," he said, tossing a pine cone into the fire, "I always thought I'd end up with someone totally different. Someone loud, someone wild. I tilted my head. And now? Jake glanced at me, then looked away. Now, I don't even know what end up with someone means anymore, because the only person I've been thinking about lately is you. There it was. Bare and honest, no teasing, no sidesteps. My heart ached in the best way, like it had been waiting for those words since long before I admitted it to myself. I stood, walked over to where he sat, and reached out my hand. Come inside. He looked up, surprised, like he wasn't sure if I meant what I was suggesting, but he didn't ask. He took my hand. Inside the RV, it was dark except for the small overhead light above the kitchenette, casting soft shadows over the messy counter and our half-packed bags. I closed the door behind us, and for a second, all I could hear was our breathing. Jake stepped closer. No smirk, no jokes. Just that look again. The one filled with questions and want and something tender that made my knees feel unsteady. His hands found my waist, tentative at first, then firmer, pulling me in. I could smell the campfire smoke on his hoodie, the faint scent of pine in his hair. I rested my palms against his chest and felt his heart racing under my touch. He kissed me again. Longer this time, deeper. There was no confusion in it, no hesitation. Just heat and care and something unmistakably real. His hands moved under my shirt, brushing the skin of my back, slow and searching. I felt his lips trail down to my neck, gentle and warm, and I let my head fall slightly to the side, breath catching in my throat. We moved to the bed, not saying a word, just feeling, just knowing. He helped me out of my shirt, and I did the same for him, our hands lingering on each other's skin, exploring every inch like it was sacred. He whispered my name once, just once, and it sent a chill down my spine. What happened next wasn't rushed. It wasn't just about heat. It was about finally letting go, finally letting in. We didn't need to say we'd crossed a line because it didn't feel like one. It felt like opening a door that had always been there, waiting. Later we lay tangled in silence, our legs intertwined, my head on his shoulder. The RV swayed slightly in the wind, but inside, everything felt still. Right. Jake's fingers brushed mine under the blanket. Do you think this changes everything? I squeezed his hand. I think it already did. The morning sun was creeping through the thin RV curtains, casting golden streaks across the crumpled blanket that now covered the both of us. Jake was still asleep, his bare shoulder rising and falling beneath my cheek. His arm was around me, loose but firm, like his body had decided to hold me, even after his mind shut down for the night. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to risk waking him or breaking whatever fragile new balance we'd found in the dark. But my mind was already racing. What now? Was this just a moment, frozen in the woods, that we'd both look back on and tuck away like some beautiful secret? Or was this the start of something that would follow us back to the world, something we wouldn't be able to ignore? Jake stirred gently and his fingers moved up to my hair, brushing it like he wasn't even awake yet, like it was something he'd wanted to do in dreams and finally could. Then he blinked slowly, eyes adjusting to the light, and when he saw me there, nestled against him, he smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a shy one, a smile like morning light. "Hey," he whispered. "Hey," I whispered back. We laid there in silence for a bit longer before he finally said, I've never felt like this with anyone before. Me either, I said. It's like we've been circling it forever, but now we're here and it just fits. He looked away for a second, chewing the inside of his cheek, the way he did when something was bothering him. But what happens when we get home? That was the question we both kept dancing around. The road trip had become this strange bubble where we didn't have to explain ourselves, where no one else existed. But reality was waiting. The jobs, the friends, the expectations neither of us had ever challenged before. I sat up slightly, resting on my elbow. We don't have to have all the answers right now. I don't want to pretend this didn't happen. I don't want to go back to acting like you're just my buddy. Jake reached up and brushed his thumb along my jaw. I don't think I could, even if I tried. The day went on like a strange dream. We made breakfast in awkward silence, shared shy smiles over burnt toast, and avoided eye contact every time we passed each other in the narrow aisle of the RV. But whenever one of us reached out, a hand on a shoulder, a brush of fingers, the connection was there, alive and undeniable. That afternoon we found a quiet spot by a lake where the water shimmered like glass and the only sound was the rustling of the wind through the trees. We sat side by side on a fallen log, skipping stones and pretending we weren't terrified of what the next few days meant. I keep thinking, Jake said after a long silence, that if we tell anyone, everything changes. People see us different, treat us different. I nodded slowly. They might. He looked over at me, serious now, eyes sharp with emotion. But I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you. I took his hand, not caring who might see us, even if it was just the trees and birds. You're not going to lose me, I said. No matter how confusing this gets, no matter what we call it, I'm still yours. I think I always was. Jake didn't reply, but he didn't need to. The way he leaned into me, resting his head against mine, said everything. We had no map for where we were going, but maybe we didn't need one. The last leg of the trip snuck up on us faster than either of us wanted to admit. Just 2 days left until we had to return the RV, unpack our bags, and face a life we weren't sure how to re-enter anymore. At least not as the same people who left. We were driving through winding forest roads, windows cracked, radio playing some soft rock station barely reaching through the trees. Jake had one hand on the wheel and the other resting comfortably on my knee, a casual gesture that still sent a warm buzz through my chest every time he did it. If someone had seen us from the outside, they might have thought we were just two guys enjoying a scenic ride. But inside that RV, in that tight little space we'd turned into something more, we were slowly unraveling the idea of what we used to be. Jake's thumb brushed along my leg like he wasn't even thinking about it, like he forgot this was new, that we hadn't always touched like this. I was thinking, he said, eyes on the road, about the first time I met you. I smirked. When I accidentally spilled orange soda on your sneakers? He laughed. Yeah. And then lied about it like a total coward. Classic. His smile faded just a little, enough to let the sincerity in. I didn't realize until now that I probably started falling for you back then. I just didn't know what it was. That quiet admission hit harder than I expected, not because I hadn't thought the same thing, but because hearing it out loud made the timeline feel more real, like this hadn't been some spontaneous spark in the woods. This had been a slow burn from the very beginning. Later that night, parked near a wide open field, under a sky littered with stars. We pulled 2 folding chairs outside and wrapped ourselves in a shared blanket. The air was crisp again, and I could hear coyotes howling in the distance, but none of it felt scary. Not with Jake beside me. We talked about everything. About old girlfriends that never felt quite right. About the nights we used to get drunk and sleep in the same bed because we were too tired to care, and how those moments now felt like small rehearsals for something much bigger. I used to lie in bed, Jake said, eyes on the stars, thinking maybe I just wasn't built to love anyone, but maybe I was just waiting for the right person to show up. I turned to him. I didn't show up, Jake. I was always there. He met my eyes, and the look he gave me in that moment was different than any look I'd ever seen him wear. It wasn't just love, it was realization. A quiet click inside him that said, "You're it." He leaned in and kissed me again, slow and unhurried, as if we had a lifetime of space ahead to explore each other. His hands found mine beneath the blanket, fingers weaving together like puzzle pieces that had waited too long to connect. We didn't talk much after that. We just sat there, the stars watching over us, the silence more sacred than any words could have been. But something changed that night. Not in a fiery explosion, not in some dramatic confession. It changed in the stillness, in the steadiness. We weren't just experimenting anymore. We weren't just seeing what this could be. We were falling. And this time, there was no going back. Packing up the RV on the last morning felt like closing the final page of a book we hadn't wanted to end. Our bags were stuffed, our gear bundled, and yet something intangible, something bigger than all of it, still lingered heavy in the air between us. Jake was quieter than usual, folding things methodically, almost mechanically, like if he focused hard enough, he wouldn't have to deal with the weight sitting in his chest. I watched him from across the narrow space, every movement of his arms, the way his brows pulled together slightly when he concentrated. He looked beautiful in that quiet. Not the kind of beautiful you see in pictures, but the kind that stirs something deep and unshakable. "You good?" I asked softly, not just about the packing. Jake looked up, eyes locking with mine for a long moment. "I don't want this to fade once we get home." That was the thing neither of us had said out loud. The fear that all of this, everything we'd shared, would dissolve under the fluorescent lights of everyday life. The stolen kisses, the whispered confessions, the tangled limbs in the dark. Would it all survive once we weren't wrapped in trees and silence? I stepped closer and wrapped my arms around his waist, holding him close, grounding him. "It doesn't have to fade, but we'll have to fight for it." Jake nodded, pressing his forehead to mine. "And what if we don't know how yet?" "Then we learn," I whispered, "together." The drive home was mostly quiet, not uncomfortable, just reflective. Our fingers rested intertwined between the seats, a quiet anchor as the miles flew by and the city skyline came back into view. The real world waited, with all its noise and labels and questions. But for once, it didn't scare me. We pulled into Jake's driveway just as the sky was melting into twilight. His house looked the same, but something about it felt smaller now, more ordinary, after the wide sky and open roads. He stepped out, stretched, then walked around to my side and opened the door. "You coming in?" he asked. I hesitated. "Do you want me to?" He didn't answer right away. He just took my face in his hands and kissed me right there, in full view of his street, his porch light flicking on above us. There were no shadows, no hiding, just us stripped of doubt. "I don't want to wake up tomorrow without you next to me," he said. That night was different. There was no urgency, no cold to chase away, just us, beneath his clean sheets, wrapped in warmth. We didn't have to explain anymore. We explored each other slowly, tenderly, pausing often to kiss, to breathe, to hold, to look. Really look. When he whispered my name, it didn't sound like a question anymore. It sounded like home. We fell asleep in a tangle of limbs and shared heartbeats. The silence between us not empty, but full of everything we now understood. And in that stillness, I realized this wasn't a detour. This was the road we were always meant to take. It had been exactly 2 weeks since the trip ended, but the RV felt like a lifetime ago, like a sacred echo that still lived between our skin. Jake and I hadn't spent a single night apart since then, but the outside world had started creeping back in. Work calls, group chats, invitations to things that used to feel normal, now suddenly loaded. We hadn't told anyone. Not yet. But it wasn't about hiding. It was about protecting the quiet space we'd built. The one where touches meant truth, and every glance said more than 1,000 words. That Saturday morning, we were lying on Jake's couch, legs tangled under a shared blanket, a dumb movie playing in the background that neither of us were watching. My head rested against his chest, and his fingers absent-mindedly traced lazy circles on my back, the kind of touch that didn't ask for attention. It just gave it. Jake cleared his throat. "So, my brother invited us to his barbecue next weekend." I shifted slightly. "Us?" He nodded. "Yeah." He said, "Bring whoever you're seeing." I didn't correct him. There was a long pause before I asked, "Do you want to go?" Jake turned his head toward me, lips curling into that familiar half smirk. "Only if you're with me when they ask who you are." I grinned, my heart thudding in that gentle way it always did now. Not nervous, just full. "Then yeah," I said. "Let's go." That night we got caught in the rain, coming back from the grocery store. We didn't run, we didn't hide. We just stood there in the parking lot, soaked and laughing, water dripping down our faces, and I pulled him close right there between parked cars and wet pavement and kissed him like it wasn't the middle of the world but the center of ours. People passed. Some stared, some didn't. But we didn't flinch. A week later at the barbecue, someone asked, "So how long have you two been?" They left the sentence hanging, unsure how to finish it without saying too much. Jake looked at me, didn't blink, and said, "Forever." We just didn't know it until now. I didn't have to say a word. My hand found his. That was enough. Our friendship had been a home for so long, a soft place to land. But what we found in that RV, in that sleeping bag, in the way he whispered my name in the middle of the night, that was something else. It wasn't about labels. It wasn't about explaining who kissed who first. It was about the moment we stopped running from what we were always meant to become. Not just best friends, not just a bromance, but a love story neither of us saw coming. The kind you don't write down right away because you're too busy living it. And in the end, maybe that's what made it unforgettable.